All I'm hearing the last few years, I'd say probably about 75 to 80% of my buddies that do hunt moose, I'd say 75 to 80% of them are leaning towards the fact that, you know, they just don't see as many moose out there, therefore they're not as successful in their harvest. And then I talk to others who say, man, this is crazy. I had an opportunity, you know, last week to probably shoot 12 moose and I didn't do it. You know what I mean? Jerry is one of those guys.
Really?
Yeah. So, like, can you give us an idea, if you're at liberty to discuss this, can you give us an idea of what the numbers look like out in this province in terms of moose?
But I can tell you that...
And I always wondered why there was a calf season to begin with. Like, does that not freak you out a little bit? It
behooved me then, and it behooves me now that we're still even talking about it.
So, you know, it's interesting, and I'll give you my opinion, and it may be wrong, but
obviously the ticks are a problem. They're a problem for everything. People walking their dogs. Dean walked his dog, 5-10 ticks every morning on his dog. You know what I mean, like that. So it's getting out of hand. So I'm wondering the next stage if they find that's a problem.
Yeah, it's a pretty challenging one.
This episode of Outdoor Journal Radio is brought to you in part by the Invasive Species Centre, protecting Canada's land and water from invasive species, and Sail, the ultimate destination for your outdoor adventures.
Well, hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Finally.
The Rock has come back to Toronto.
No, the Journal has come back to Oshawa.
The Dirty Schwa. Here we are, back in the Dirty Schwa.
What I'm cooking.
Give me a hell yeah!
Hell yeah, another wrestling. Boy, we're on the wrestling roll. We were talking about Vince McMahon earlier. My God, look at us go.
It has been a long month, it seems.
Oh, my God.
We spent 3 weeks in the eastern part of Canada, shooting the last of the Fishing Canada episodes for the year, and now here we are back home. Longest road trip in memory. I'm sure we've had as long, maybe back in the Outdoor Journal television
it'd be
days,
like a double trip, like a Fishing Canada / Outdoor Journal or something like that, maybe. But I think this is the longest Fishing Canada trip for sure, and probably in ever. You know what I mean?
Man.
20 days on the road.
Woo! And I got
home, my dog didn't even know who the hell I was. Hi, buddy.
You know you're getting old when.
Oh, shit. When I wake up every day.
You know you're getting old when you go on a 3-week road trip and definitely not one evening did we ever just sort of hang out, have a few drinks and smoke a cigar and just chill. Yeah. In 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Not once. We were in bed whenever we could finish dinner and get the hell to bed.
You had that little smoking area at the Delta, but that was no drink. We did one night behind the Delta. We had a beer and a cigar.
Did you?
Behind the Delta.
Yeah, you weren't there, but we went. Remember?
I wasn't invited to that.
You were there, you peckerhead. Sure.
I don't remember that.
The big chairs, all the chairs along the river.
He's claiming innocence right now.
Steve, you and I, for sure.
Oh, yeah, we did. In those big chairs.
Yes, in those big chairs. See?
Is it ironic that I was absent for that night? Is it just like, what happened there? It was a timing thing, right?
We got kicked out of the pool area because that's where we wanted to smoke our cigars. So we got kicked out of there. So it was just, we just had a moment where it was a beautiful evening. It was the weather was spectacular. And we said, you know what, we should have a beer and a cigar. And we did so.
We had a poker night too.
You had a poker night in Nova Scotia.
We had a poker. Oh, that was a crazy one. Oh, my God.
So I wish
we had some stories.
I'll take it back. I was on the road and did not participate in any of this fun and merriment that obviously when I'm not there, the crew seems to enjoy.
The truth will come out sooner or later.
And that's it.
Ange went to bed at 8 o'clock every night. We stayed up a little bit later, just a bit, slightly.
And I was up at the crack of 4:30 every morning.
We didn't have a Fuente that whole trip, did we?
Nope. Not a one.
We never do that. On a 20-dayer, we never did that. Wow.
Arturo's not even going to like us
He
anymore.
hates us right now. My customers are done.
Yeah.
Oh, well.
No, I'm
Good
lying.
trip.
I'm lying. I did have an Arturo with Randy from Trailer Park.
Pat Roach.
Pat
Okay.
Roach and I had a Fuente.
Did Pat have an Arturo?
Yeah.
Yeah, did he like it? He must have loved it.
He
Yeah.
was oh, Angelo. He says, I can't believe how wonderful this tastes. If you know who we're talking about, Randy on Trailer Park Boys, he was down in New Brunswick doing the same gig we were doing. And so we got a chance to spend a bit of time with him. And
That's
talk
a great guy.
Totally opposite. Pat Roach, who is the actor, totally opposite than the character Randy from Trailer Park Boys.
Yeah.
Totally.
I bet you they're all
opposite.
opposite. I bet you Bubbles is such a character, but there's no way he's like that in real life. You know what I mean?
I don't know.
Would Julian
It's
be
a good-
drinking a shot of rum every second of his life? Sort of, you know what I mean? So
Can you imagine? He was telling us, Pat was telling us about an annual fishing trip that he did with Bubbles and Julian and Ricky. Now, can you? And they would go away for a week.
If they were in character, that'd be the best fishing trip ever.
Can you
ever,
imagine? I would pay for that.
Oh, hell yeah.
I would love to be a part of that.
Oh,
That
yeah.
would be the most exciting thing I think I could ever do,
Yeah, that'd be a good one.
especially if they stayed in character.
Oh, my God. Oh, my God. The Ricky-isms that would come out of a friggin' fishing trip. Oh, my God. Anyway.
Anyways, we did a podcast with Pat. When is that airing?
It's done. It's out.
It just aired. Yeah.
Oh, it's aired already?
By the time this is out, it'll be aired like a month ago.
Oh my God,
We're
I'm
way
losing
ahead.
track of time here.
Yeah,
'cause
we're in the future.
So we're in the future right now.
Yeah.
So we're in the future. So you've seen that episode
Yeah.
with
They put that out when you went to bed at 8 o'clock. You were up at 4:30, but that news had already passed. It's old news to you, right? So
You know, one of the favorite things Vince McMahon, his character did.
love Vince McMahon.
I loved it when he said, "You're fired."
you're fine. And
I want to do that.
you know what though? You might want to watch out for Stone Cold. Remember, he used to stunner the bastard right in the middle of the. You couldn't fire him because he's laying on the ground there.
Give me a hell yeah.
That's right, Stevie. Stunner Vince
I
McMahon.
just want to do that so bad. Just he'd look at them. And, "You're fired."
It was
I
so.
wanna do
The
that.
first time he ever did that was so classic. I can't remember who it was, but it was such a classic moment in wrestling. Vince, he was so good, man.
A wonderful program we have for you today when we finally get on track and get moving here.
I like that free for all stuff, don't you
almighty.
think? Why? See, you're making it look
We're
negative.
just
No,
going like
I think this is fun.
We just
The
ate
audience
up
likes it.
7 minutes of valuable entertainment.
Oh, I'm sorry.
All right, 7 minutes.
That
of
is
valuable.
probably the best entertainment they're going to get in this whole podcast right there.
Joining us later on in the program, somebody that I'm going to ask him, but I believe him and I have done similar interviews in the past when I was doing radio.
Holy moly.
And I
a while
remember,
ago.
a few times he was on the show talking about the same very subject that we're going to talk about today. His name is Dr. Brent Patterson with the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry. And at the time, we were talking about moose populations declining, not declining, up, down, who knows, how are we going to count them? We got the right count. And also winter tick was on the script all the time. So
Sounds like a smart dude.
I think it's the same Dr. Patterson that I recall from back then.
Focus
we'll
on
find out,
focus
when
on
he comes up.
mammalian predator prey systems. I like mammalian. That's a great word.
Mammalian?
Mammalian.
Hello there. What do you do? I'm a mammalian predator administrator.
Oh my God! What a great title, eh?
He will also be joined by Joe Northrup, who is also a research scientist with the Ontario Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry. And we're going to talk about moose and mooses. Mooses. Is it mooses?
No,
Moose.
not mooses.
Mooses. I like mooses, though.
It's not.
I once had a mouses problem in the basement of my house. I'll tell you that right now.
Moses in his houses.
I had a lot of mouses. And I took care of each and every one of them.
Did ya? Just little traps or like little traps?
Personally, yeah.
Or pellet gun, BB gun stuff?
I did a
That's
couple.
always fun.
I made it entertaining.
Gotta lead 'em a little bit.
I kept them, on their toes because if you give them the same all the time, then they get used to it, and they're
What's the best mouse trap out there? Is it still that old Victory one or Victor, whatever they call it, Victoria?
Victor,
the little wooden ones, snap
red,
traps.
Yeah, with the red V, Victor.
Because there's plastic ones out there now. There's ones they go in the little tunnel and they can eat they get out. And it's just that might, and you know the best one about the wooden one, the Victor, whatever they call it, you can hear that snap. You go, oh, I got one. You walk downstairs
and it's also so exciting because when you're setting them,
there's
an element of danger to this.
Hell
Okay,
yeah.
this is not without its potential personal injury claims. Okay, because I know I scared the hell out of myself so many times because you got to just set and then you got to push it to where you want it, right? And
that's the hard part.
And it's always
setting
when
it where you want it.
Exactly. Boom! It scares the hell out of you.
And if you turn it upside down and it snaps, it jumps about 6 feet in the air. Oh yeah, they're nasty little things.
Peanut butter is my favorite bait of choice.
Yeah, cheese whiz is good too. It works good too. But
peanut butter,
yeah, peanut butter, you can't go wrong. Problem is the friggin' dog comes back with a friggin' snot mouse trap on his nose because he got it in the peanut butter. He likes it so much.
How the hell did we get onto mouse traps?
Mooses and mices.
So anyways, we're going to talk about moose, where the population is and where it's not. They've got a brand new study apparently that they're going to unveil with us. Although I think they've been studying it for the last 30 years.
I think you have to study something like that.
It's ongoing.
It's our big boy, right?
We're slowly counting down to the new Fishing Canada broadcast season, January of 25.
Damn.
I know. Think about it. We're 3 months away.
Yeah.
So you're still
moly.
enjoying the 24 season on Global Television Network and on the Sportsman Channel Canada and WFN for you folks south of the border, CHX, CITL, a plethora of broadcast opportunities on the Fishing Canada Television
Big words
network.
today. Plethora and mammalian so far. I like it. Let's keep going.
We barely even started. We're like 10 minutes, 11 minutes in.
And a lot of that was fluff and poppycock, so this is good.
I think the 3 weeks on the road might have done us some good. I think
we got a lot smarter.
A lot, not just a little.
We knew to light up the cigars and open the beers when Ange goes to bed.
You're fired.
He used to do the big you're. Like he'd have, you're fired. Then he'd lay it out there. It was so good.
Speaking of wonderful products that you could buy.
His face is redder than your logo there.
Right here behind me is the latest, the greatest Fishing Canada swag. An assortment of swag, not just one-dimensional. These folks at Fishing Canada know you can get the old traditional normal, call it Fishing Canada logo, or some of the new stuff that's being reinterpreted as we speak. New product is being worked on as we speak. To be unveiled.
Some nice secret stuff coming out. You got some good designs.
Yeah, there's some stuff.
Did you do any of the illustrating?
No, I was too busy smoking cigars by the pool at the Delta.
Oh, we got kicked out of the pool area. They wouldn't allow. You can't smoke there.
Yeah, that wouldn't be the first time.
Over the other side of the fence, you can smoke right there. We made sure the smoke blew in towards. There was nobody at the pool. It was nighttime. It was closed basically. Come on, just let us sit over there by the pool and have our beverage.
Why is it that every time I'm absent from a shoot, there seems to be a problem with the Fishing Canada crew, sort of ruffling feathers?
There's never a problem. We take care of business, buddy. It always ends in a good way.
Oh, yeah. Go talk to the mayor of Wawa about that.
Guy wearing cement overshoes in that pool right now. I don't know if they've got him out yet.
Anyway, it's all happening at fishingcanada.com or the store. You can go through that address, Peter Bowman.
Shop.fishingcanada.com.
That's it. Listener feedback. Terry Hodgkinson.
Oh, boy.
I love that name. Hodgkinson.
Wow. That's a good one, isn't
Hodgkinson. Via Spotify.
Great show. Love when you interview.
What is that?
It's a nice shot, eh?
That is a great shot.
That's him? That's Terry?
He looks like somebody I know.
That's scary Terry right there. That's not Terry.
What is the purpose of that? You're just putting it up?
Well, here, let me read on here. Great show. Love when you interview other fishing celebs and talk about the business and behind-the-scenes stuff. Keep working on Leo. Guess Leo won't come on here, obviously.
Leo who?
And get Bob Izumi back on. Cheers, Terry.
I love
Thanks,
that,
buddy.
I love that.
That's a great picture.
All right, at the risk of sounding dumb, has that
No.
been aired?
Next.
next. That's coming up.
That's coming up
soon. So we did. We took the opportunity to spend a bit of time with Bob at the Pan Am Black Bass Championship in New Brunswick, Canada. He was the team captain for Team Canada. And he was nice enough to give us a bit of his time and a bit of interview.
He gave us a lot of his time. He was great.
Was good.
Bobby was awesome for this whole deal.
We got some great shots of him during the tournament too.
Yeah.
Some just
some great
when
footage.
I say great, I mean like just so it was perfect that morning sort of look.
Yeah.
And Scott Martin. Let's not forget Scott Martin. By the way, Scott Martin reached out to me, remind me to talk to our people.
He wants that footage.
He wants that footage. So remind me when we get off this podcast, because I will forget. I've already forgot. I said to myself this morning, I got to get in first thing this morning and talk to Joe and Boba. And here I am.
Talking to me.
To you.
Talking to the lovely audience, wherever camera we got to look at here.
Remind me, please. So yeah, that's great. A great show. What do you think of that? What do you think of that? So we have to do more interviews with celebs and talk about.
Well, I think that's a great idea because I mean that is our industry, and I mean, be it competition to us, be it friends with us, or like a Cronzy interview. So there's nothing like a Cronzy interview.
I'm trying to think, who have we not done?
Yeah, we can do them again.
Oh, you want to repeat?
Why not? I mean, there's only how many are left, bud?
That's what I'm saying. We've done Cronzy, we've done Mercer, we've done Izumi, we've done.
By the way, Mercer's never done us. By the way,
no,
God forbid. You know, he's got a podcast too.
Who has?
Yeah, you're right.
Who has?
They don't have. Leo doesn't do podcasts either, give or take. Obviously, you know what I mean. He wants nothing to do with that sort of thing. Bob doesn't do a podcast. He did a bit of a radio thing with Gordy Pfizer, but that was a whole different deal. So they really don't. They don't delve into the whole world of fishing media like we do, I guess you'd say. But yeah, who has? I mean, we had that one guy from the U.S. there. That one dude had a podcast and all that. Dino, remember?
Who's that? Dean?
That we had on, or they did?
We had him on, but he
the wet fly swing guy,
something like that.
The what?
Fly fishing podcast.
Did you say the wet fly swing guy?
Yeah.
That's a great title. Welcome to the Wet Fly Swing Guy. Brought to you by Outdoor Journal Radio podcast.
I don't remember that.
Anyway, doesn't matter.
Not to bring a downer on this wonderful conversation, but while we were away and talking about celebrities and who we've had on the show and have not had on the show, our good friend Colin McKeown passed away from the new fly fisher while we were down east.
Yes.
And our condolences certainly go out to the family and Mark and
friends
and business associates.
Great guy.
I can't even imagine going through something like that. I mean, family aside, obviously that's the biggest issue, but from a business standpoint, because they were, if I'm not mistaken, their 25th season of the new fly fisher.
No kidding.
Yeah. So,
wow.
Just a terrible thing. And Pete and I had an opportunity to have a coffee with him earlier this year, right?
God.
It was February, March.
Where were we? It was we were
Thunder Bay, Sault Ste. Marie. We were at a convention,
Sault Ste. Marie. That's where it was.
Tourism convention.
Sault Ste. Marie.
And we were able. We broke away for about an hour. We went across the street to a Starbucks and just hung out
Sat there and
together
talked.
for an hour.
It was great. I'm glad. I'm so glad we did that.
You know, one of the regrets I have, and I know you know about this, one of the regrets I have, Colin had been ill for a few years. We've all kind of known about it, but thought that it was relatively under control. Obviously not. But at the beginning of each season for the last 3 shooting seasons, we would talk, him and I, and we would say, we have got to shoot a joint episode. Mm-hmm. We've got to do a Fishing Canada / new fly fisher episode where we will co-host each other's show somehow. And every time, you know, we'd bring it up, we'd all get excited about it. And it was a wonderful idea, and let's make it happen. And then the next thing you know, 3/4 of the way through the season, and it didn't
we tried
happen.
a couple in this year. Earlier in the year, we tried it, but the lodges didn't work out, and et
We
cetera,
came
et cetera. And then
close.
we came close. This is the closest we came, and then
came close.
and then it just didn't materialize. And then all of a sudden, your year is set, and you just move on and do all your shoots that you're on, and et cetera, et cetera. But
And
it would've been nice.
I regret not
Yeah.
not working maybe a little bit harder at making it happen. I regret that terribly.
He'd have been fun on a shoot. I'm sure he would have been a hoot on the shoot. You know,
wild.
a hoot on a
Anyways,
shoot.
Wherever you are, my friend,
Here.
At some point, we'll get together and make that happen in another world. All righty. Moving on, Mr. Bowman.
Are we at Conservation Corner, Dean, by any chance now?
We are.
We are.
Brought to you by the Invasive Species
Center. Yes.
And what, pray tell, is this
This
all
is
about?
about this dirty thing called a grass carp, my friend. One of the four, as everybody probably knows from past podcasts, but we keep preaching it because it needs to be preached. One of 4 species of Asian carp and has the ability to change fishing as we know it. They can ruin stuff. They can ruin lots of stuff.
How is that?
Well, they eat lots of stuff. And they eat lots of stuff that are nice fishy stuff.
I'm not laughing at the premise of the
No,
whole thing.
no,
I'm
he's
just laughing at how you're doing this, which is very, very good.
Very
It's got a
organic,
bit of
right?
a
Very
comedic-
organic.
Bit of a comedic touch.
You know what I mean?
I love it.
Sometimes I have a bit of comedic stuff that I can throw out there every
What
now and then.
Mr. Bowman is trying to say, that these fish have a voracious appetite. In fact, they can eat up to 40% of their own weight on a daily basis. And if you think these are those, normal 2-3 pound carp, some of these fish can grow up to 80 pounds.
How often do you see normal 2 and 3 pound carp?
4
How often?
pound, 6 pound. I don't know.
Keep going.
8.
Like a 10 is a small
10.
one for common carp. Okay, go ahead now.
They can consume an awful lot of vegetation, kind of like myself on this diet that I've been on. I actually, now that I think of it,
You're a carp.
I might be right there, right in line with
You're like
consuming.
a big old sucker. That's what you are. You're a big old sucker.
Now, there.
And that's the problem for our species of fish that need and desire and have to have weeds around them, right? Like perch, like walleye, like smallmouth, largemouth, muskie, etc. Trout, a lot of trout species need weeds, not lake trout so much, but the brookies and rainbows, they
Every
need
fish.
weeds.
What
Pretty much the
I was trying
insects
to
that are in the
think about
weeds,
it. I was trying to think about this last time we did this ad. What species of fish? Now think about this. Over the course of a 12-month period, does not rely on vegetation to survive?
That's a great question.
Is there a fish?
It's a great question. The only one I would wonder about, and they do, I'm sure, is lake trout. But I'm sure they do.
The one I would wonder about would be the salmon family, like Atlantic salmon.
But they eat bugs and everything, and the bugs grow in the weeds, right? And they do all that. So that's why the trout a lot of times hang in the weeds too. So
Good point. Pacific salmon, maybe Chinook salmon, maybe
kelp, weeds are kelp. Kelp is weeds, right?
There you
So,
go.
I don't know.
So the fact that this critter consumes the vegetation that, in fact, houses food for the other game fish that we so much covet and chase and follow, that in itself is an issue, let alone the fact that it could actually inadvertently, by eating all this vegetation, you could probably kill off things like crustaceans and entire species, subspecies of invertebrates too that call vegetation home.
Absolutely.
Is the reason why we need to be a little more vigilant. I know we make fun of it sometimes because we're a pair of idiots, but at the end of the day, you need to take it seriously. As anglers, the best thing that we could do is better understand what it is that this grass carp, number one, looks like, what it does, what the net result can be. And we need to do that by
going to asiancarp.ca and learning to identify these creatures. And then, as I always say, do like little Petey Bowman, take care of business when you see one.
the bonker.
Don't be nice to
Use
it.
the bonker.
Don't be nice to it. Just kick his ass. That's all you have to do.
If you ever caught one. I don't even think, by the way, there are cases, I believe there's DNA evidence that these fish, in fact, are starting to infiltrate our freshwater system, the Great Lake system. So it's not that far-fetched that at some point you could run into one.
I wonder if we're ever going to see one in the wild, you and I. You know what I mean?
Boy, we'd have fun though, wouldn't we?
Oh, buddy, you'd be holding me back. Petey, okay, wait, Petey, wait. Is there anybody looking here? You better watch out.
Anyways, it's all there.
AsianCarp.ca.
Thank you. Podcast network highlights that you will see on fishingcanada.com.
Yes,
Come
sir.
on.
Among other places.
Yes, sir.
If you're not aware of the fact, this very program was the basis, the offshoot to a network called the Outdoor Journal Radio Podcast Network, upon which we have
Nice, bud.
a whole series of very talented podcasters doing programming, one of which is the Eating Wild show with Antonio Malaca and CK, CJ, and CF, and you got PW. Like they all have these initials on that show.
TD, Top Dog.
Top Dog and
HS, Hookset.
Hookset, and God only knows. Wonderful people, but they should have names like Peter
And S.
Angelo.
Smash. S for Smash.
Yeah. Anyways, we're highlighting one of their episodes, episode 65 to be exact, on the network right now. And it's a fascinating interview with Corey Johnson of Bass fame.
BASS fame. Man, the guy lit it up last year. 2 elite events he won, I believe. Yeah, Florida and St. Lawrence. He started out the year and he ended up the year with 2 elites. That's pretty damn good for a Canadian boy. I'll tell you that right now.
Do you remember the days?
I remember the days
when we used to say, "Is a Canadian ever going to be well represented in the U.S. on the professional bass circuits?"
Yeah.
Now,
Finally.
but
happening.
now we're not saying that anymore. Now we're saying, when are we going to win first, second, and third
Yeah.
in those events?
Yeah.
Because that could happen here in the next year or two.
Oh shit! Yeah.
You know?
That'd be so cool, wouldn't it be?
And I'd like to.
That'd be great.
I'd like to think that we can take claim to some of that glory.
Oh, I think it'll happen. Another thing I'm wondering is how many more Canadians will eventually make it into, let's say, the elites. I don't think there's anybody in the Bass Pro League yet, or in the MLF. I'm not sure if there's a Canadian in there yet or not.
I think no, there isn't.
There's
None of them
Luzak and guys like that, but I think they're not in the main events. So the heavy hitters and stuff like that. But anyways,
Hey, you want to know more about that subject and much more, I'm sure, just check it out. It's episode 65 of Eating Wild, featuring Canada's own Corey Johnstone, who, as we said, is lighting it up. And Antonio is at his best with it, and so is all of the whole crew.
I downloaded it, but I haven't heard it yet. Who's doing the interview? Do you know? Is it CJ? CJ has to be on that one.
He's on it with Antonio. It was just those two.
Yeah, CJ's a huge fan of bass fishing too.
Yeah,
What
he
can
was
you
pumped.
tell us about this said episode, Dino?
Yeah, they talked a lot about like the tournament, because this was like 2 or 3 days after he won. So it was pretty
so
fresh.
very fresh. Nice.
Yeah, but then they went into a little bit about like the family stuff in Peterborough, and then some hunting and cooking and stuff like that.
Did they talk about the altercation that there was in that tournament at all?
I think they alluded to it, but I don't think Corey wanted to get too into it.
I had a feeling.
I'm sure eventually he will.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
What was that happen?
Just the Chris was fishing an area that was a known Johnston spot. They had discovered the spot.
Oh, right. I remember now.
A very,
Yeah.
very good specific
Yes.
area. And Buddy was right beside him, just basically, not boat to boat, but very close to him in that. And they were just they were not happy about people moving in on something they discovered. So I think that's what it was.
And he
Don't
made a public comment too about it, right? That was more of the controversy, didn't he?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he made a public
What
comment.
do you mean he made a...
Corey, I believe, made a comment that they were gonna. I think they were gonna give him the Johnston sandwich or something like that. So the boats both go right in on him, sort of thing like that. So I don't know. Whatever. So
you know what? That's an interesting topic. I'd love to do a podcast about that.
that'd be a good one.
And maybe we bring on the Johnsons as guests on that podcast, because we've all been, any of us that have fished for a living, over the last 30 or 40 years have been confronted with that situation, from both sides, by the way, from both sides.
Yeah, you're
Right?
you're driving up to the spot and all of a sudden, oh no, somebody's on it. You know what I mean? Sort of thing like that.
And what constitutes
Your water,
your
right?
water? Like when somebody says, hey, you're fishing my water, what exactly does that mean?
Yeah. Well, that'd be a good one because I mean, if you get to the spot first, and then somebody comes in and says, "You're on my spot." No, I'm on my spot.
But,
you know what I mean?
But see, it shouldn't be your spot, my spot.
No.
The rules are pretty clear. If I'm there, you cannot encroach within whatever the rules are. Each organization has its own rules.
Yeah.
It's not a question that it's my spot. I just got there before you did.
You know what used to piss me off the most when we were fishing a tournament is if you were working a row of docks, a row of trees or whatever, and some arsehole would come right in about 3 trees or 3 docks before you and then go the same way and cut you off. Like, you know what I mean? You're doing it.
But even that, so what are you supposed to do?
There's nothing you can do.
Right.
You call him an arsehole and say you're...
No. What is that guy supposed to do? He had in his plans, that guy you're talking about, his plan was my number 2 spot.
He's going to fish.
It happened to us.
He's probably going to fish all those docks, right?
Right. He was going to fish.
So go back and fish back where I fished, asshole, and do the same thing. Start there again. No, he's not going to, right? So you go somewhere else. I've turned around from stuff like that. I said, I can't go in on there. Cut a guy off like that. I couldn't do it. I just wouldn't do it. I didn't like the whole thought of it. So, but anyway.
That's because you and I don't like people in general when we're fishing. We don't want to see anybody. It's our water, damn it.
I want to go way
It's
up north,
ours.
fish a lake by myself.
No, but it's an interesting subject.
That would be a good one.
And Dean, I know I tell you probably once per episode, I say to you, write that down because we need to have. I know, and I forget immediately after I tell you to write it down.
And Dean knows that you forget,
And you
so
know
he knows
what
he
the
doesn't have
amazing-
to. He doesn't even write it down.
No,
he
he
just pretends.
just pretend. But you know what the amazing part is? I have a book here with a working utensil. This works. I checked it out. Look, it works.
Okay.
You think I would write it down and not rely on Dean? Because you're right. Dean doesn't even. He said, "Yeah, boss, I got this here. Let me write that." And he knows.
I like your Dean voice. That was good.
He knows that I'm going to forget, and he's off the hook. That's the problem here.
See, that's the problem with guys like Ange and I, who most definitely can hide our own Easter eggs and never remember where we put them. So, he's writing shit down here. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and shit. Dean, you better stay onto this, buddy. This one you might want to follow up on.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's something you don't have to, but
Hey, Dean, can you write down that we want to do an episode on what constitutes my spot? What is my fishing spot? What does that mean? I want to do a whole episode, and I want to invite the Johnsons on, either or, on that episode, and anybody else that you can think of that would make that an entertaining.
Well, we
piece
were
of-
trying to get Chris, just a bit, like I said before, so about winning the Angler of the Year, because those boys just tore it up this year. So maybe we'll get Chris on. He can at least, if it was solo or with Corey, that'd be great. It's in hunting season right now, though, boys. They are hunters. So
I'm
you're gonna have a
noticing
hard
it's
time
hard to get a hold of people
Oh,
now.
they are hard to get. This time of year, especially for here's a quick one of the tournament anglers. They do this all summer. They're up and down and traveling, putting 10, 20, 30,000 miles in their trucks and all that. Finally, it's over. I'm not fishing at all. I'm going hunting now. I'm going to stay away for weeks. And I believe Corey and Chris are moose hunting right now, if I'm not mistaken.
Speak,
So.
they would be interested in this podcast, actually.
Well, they might, yeah.
Right?
Probably listening to it in their stands right now.
Oh, it could be. That's right. That's
Yeah,
possible.
that's what they're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, guaranteed.
Moose don't do stands, do they?
Yeah. You can
You
hunt
do-
moose out of stands.
Do you?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Sure, why not?
Oh, I thought you kind of had
They don't
to,
look up.
You do
Their
spot and
antlers are
stock
too
and
big.
stuff, but yeah.
I thought you had to kind of go
Takes them
searching,
5 minutes to get their head back down.
sniff, moose poop, and determine how long it's been out of the body and the temperature. And some people taste it to see what they're feeding on. Do you know that?
Yeah. I've done a lot of that. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Just like you just wrote down. I want to see, by the way, I'm going to check and see where you wrote
Check
this
these
down.
notes.
Anyways, a great episode. It's called Eating Wild. They don't have a title on this episode, Dean, I see. You don't
Episode
normally-
65?
Yeah, but there's
Corey
65.
Johnston, probably.
That's it. Just
Corey Johnston, yeah.
That's as creative as they could get on that.
Well, he's a big name.
Oh, I see what you're saying. That is worthy of a title.
Angelo Viola. They would put Angelo Viola down if they had you on there. They would just put down Angelo Viola.
If they had me. I mean,
yeah, you were number one out of the gate, weren't you?
It was like 64 episodes ago.
You've only done one?
Yeah. See what I mean? Now do you understand the problem?
Who are you?
Yeah, exactly. They talk about the vibrant culture of the bass fishing, the whole bass fishing scene that's going on south of the border, and also the technology that's evolved in the bass fishing. And boy,
has it ever evolved?
Where can it go next year? I mean, holy mackerel.
You know, lesser and lesser is what they're doing. Right? They're not allowing it so much. So,
anyways, great episode, Eating Wild, episode 65, featuring none other than Corey Johnson of the Johnson Brothers. And speaking of bass fishing, which I just mentioned, the bass technology, etc., Sail is your home for all things bass fishing, Mr. Bowman.
I was just in there the other day.
Were you?
I was in to buy some
pliers with blue handles. I'm like Karnak. The answer is blue needle nose, very expensive pliers with blue handles. Still looking for that
exact one.
The question is, what was Peter Bowman buying at the sales store last week? Am I right?
You were close, but I was buying detergent and repellent spray. So for my rain gear, something that everybody should, by the way, use. If you have good rain gear, Gore-Tex, you have to have the right wash material.
So what's the repellent?
The spray repellent you put on afterwards. You don't do that?
Oh, yes. I'm sorry. It's two-step. You're right. You wash with that stuff.
You can buy it together, but I'd rather spray it on there like that.
Me too.
But I was in there, and I can't not go through the fishing section. Cannot go, just say, I'll stay downstairs. I have to go upstairs. So I went up there, and lo and behold, I went to the Izumi rack there, and they had a bunch of items for 40% off right now.
Get out.
Right now. This is October 7th we're recording this, so I don't know how long it'll take for the sale to go on, but 40 points off of certain Izumi products.
Did they have Twitch bait on there?
They had Twitch baits, but there was no discount on those. Discount was on some one knockers, the rattle bait. There was a discounts on some of the 1.5 square bills.
That's a great bait.
Oh my God, for 40 off, they're already a good price. Japanese made.
Way underrated.
So, anyways, when you're going to sale, you always check out. Go up to that upstairs and check out all the stuff, and they got lots.
If you don't have a sale store in your neighborhood, which unfortunately a lot of us don't. We do. We're fortunate.
Right. We're right beside it.
Head on over to sail.ca. That's SAIL.ca. And check their entire store on their website. I mean, it's like anything else that you're ordering online. Sometimes you don't have to touch and feel. Yep. And when it comes to baits, I think that's one of those items that you can.
Yeah, and if you're looking for those deals, there's a little title up top there. Is clearance, I believe it's called.
Up to 60%.
Up to 60% up. And I'll tell you, you get some really good deals is on clothing. You want to buy a new winter jacket coming up or something like that.
Baby.
You get 30 or 40 points off a winter jacket. That turns into hundreds of dollars sometimes. So.
That's all happening at Sail or sail.ca. Now, in the news on fishingcanada.com, if you happen to be there right now, you can check it out. It's called Shark Sightings on the Rise in the Maritimes.
I heard that. Did you hear that?
I heard it. What was that?
Oh, I like that movie.
There it is there. Holy
Look at that sucker. He got a lot of food there, doesn't he? Look at that. No wonder he's so fat.
And you guys were fishing his waters.
We were fishing said waters in the Maritimes in Nova Scotia, yes.
Recently.
And unfortunately for us, Nick and I, it was the only week nobody saw a shark. We were there for I don't know how many days, and nobody even heard. We got sand sharks, those little dogfish. Those things are just a pain in the arse is what they are. So.
We've been told about the shark population in the Bay of Fundy for a few years now. And the fact that they don't mind, they're very bold. They don't mind chasing down stripers that are on your line when you're trying to bring them to the boat and shoot them off.
They probably cherish it. It's like a big live bait for them, right?
Recently, locals untangled a great white in Port Medway. How far is that from where?
I don't know where that is, to be honest with you, but it's Nova Scotia, I'm assuming, right?
Yep.
Nova Scotia. A duck hunter lost his dog last year to a shark attack in the same area.
Wow.
That's not good.
Greg's been telling us that every year it seems to be more great whites. So it was only a matter of time before these encounters started, becoming mainstream, right?
Another one there. So by the way, if you're wondering about sharks in the East Coast, some of them are tagged, and you can get an app called Shark Tracker. I believe it's called Shark Tracker, and you can actually watch certain fish that are in and you see they have little spots on a map where they're moving to and from and all that kind of stuff.
Did you guys do that when you were fishing
No.
stripers? That would have been interesting to see. Like, if it's that accurate, you say, "Holy moly!" There's like a great white.
Billy, right, or Martha, right? Or they name them all too, right? So, but you're seeing a lot. They're seeing more and more. They said an estimated 400 great whites enter Nova Scotia waters every summer. Now, I had no idea because the Shark Tracker has about 8 of them, maybe, or 10, or something like that. You know what I mean? So, but if there's that many, that's insane.
I remember years ago when we did great white dive
South
Africa. I remember the skipper who was taking us out to these areas was telling us that, and this was a very popular part of South Africa for great white dives because of the seal population. I remember him telling us that there was an estimated population of over 600 great whites that were there all the time. So we're getting close to that in the Bay of Fundy, obviously.
Think about that.
400 already is estimated.
South Africa is the biggest in the world, so we're getting close.
Holy smokes. Anyway, it's a fascinating article. It's on fishingcanada.com as we speak. It's in the news section called Shark Sightings on the Rise in the Maritimes, and in particular Nova Scotia, and in particular the Bay of Fundy. So go check it out. Great read for sure. Fan question of the week, Mr. Bowman.
Who's that brought to you by, Angelo?
Brought to you by fishfindermounts.com. That's who.
Well,
Fishfindermounts.com. If you're looking for a way to hang a piece of electronics on your boat, stop searching, go to fishfindermounts.com, period, and you will find it.
Thank you for that. Well said.
My pleasure.
This question was brought to us by Kyle Benning from Iowa. Wow, nice. I love it. Via email. It's info@fishingcanada.com. Kyle's question is, any plans in the upcoming season to spotlight some of the native rough fish species like various suckers, bowfin, sheep's head, or gar?
Well, let's start.
Wait.
Oh.
They are incredibly powerful fish species and a blast to catch. I'd like to see them get more love and the strategy and techniques to catch them, especially gar. Get some discussion and screen time.
To start with, then we have to go through that list and say we've done bowfin. Not maybe as much as we could.
Oh, no.
But we have
barely
done,
scratched
but
the surface.
But we've done a bowfin episode. We've done a sheephead episode. And we've done gar episodes.
But his question is, any plans in the upcoming season to spotlight?
Well, wait a minute. Hold it. The upcoming season is the one I was just talking about, right?
Correct.
The 25 broadcast season, which, by the way, happens to coincide. Now, think about this. How ironic. Happens to coincide with our 40th anniversary.
Give me a hell yeah.
Hell yeah. Congratulations.
So, why not? Why? Dean, write this down, will you, buddy?
Yep.
I think our 40th anniversary broadcast should feature
all the rough species.
All of the
and
rough species.
Not a largemouth, not a smallmouth, not a walleye or nothing.
What a statement that would be.
Oh, would that be a statement?
What a statement that would be.
Pike,
I'm in.
I spit on you. Get out of here.
I'm in on that.
So that would be, our upcoming airing season. Unfortunately, for Kyle, we don't have any of those coarse species on there. However, it's a great one. We were just talking about this, Ange and I and Dean and I at various points, just about, doing something different again. So great reminder. I think we should do it.
I think we should. I mean, it's the perfect time because we're just starting to schedule for that 25 shooting season. Yeah. So I think we should.
And what prompted us on thinking that way was the short-nosed sturgeon in the St. John River. We just got back. Nick got a couple of short-nosed. So it was like, wow, that's a cool exotic species. We should think about more stuff like that.
Does anybody know, does anybody have the definitive answer to what constitutes a coarse fish, which I'm assuming rough fish species he calls it, but the actual word is coarse fish. What makes a coarse fish not a game fish? Is there a definitive, here's the rule book, A, B, C, D.
I know in the UK, they have coarse fish tournaments and stuff like that. So, but that probably means there's probably no bass in that pond. There's no muskie in that pond or anything. Anyway,
but that's how, what I mean is,
I know
is there a physical difference? Is there a biological difference between a coarse fish and what we know as a game fish? In other words, teeth maybe? Do teeth play a role in it?
Okay, bowfin are full of teeth.
They are.
So, okay,
absolutely.
Nasty.
Gar
got more teeth than a bowfin.
So it says that it's defined by being considered undesirable as food or sport.
That's why the word coarse. Coarse, we don't like them. Maybe it's the edibility. Maybe coarse meat or flesh, whatever.
That's weird.
Yeah.
Because as a sport fish, bowfin, gar, and sheep's head are ridiculously fun to catch.
Oh.
You know what I mean?
Originally, actually, apparently, it was anything that's not a salmonid.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, that makes more sense. Like coarse in the sense of the scales. The scale, big, thick scales versus a salmonoid has these tiny little wee scales and the trout and all that, right? So,
but a catfish or a mudcat or a channel cat doesn't have scales at all.
He got none.
You know,
he's a fine fish.
And they're incredibly good eating, by the way. So
and
it's
good
not
fighting.
Fighting.
I love catfish.
So really, it's just misnomer
it's
to call them.
Misnomer.
Yeah, because a burbot is a coarse fish too.
Of course,
and they're incredible.
Of course, get it?
That's funny.
Thank you, Dean.
So anyways, to answer the question by Kyle Benning from Iowa. We will endeavor to see if we can't schedule a few more in the upcoming season.
Yeah, Kyle, I'm going to say we're probably not going to do a sucker show. We don't.
Why not?
Oh, there is.
There is.
There's what?
You guys did that in the season coming up. There's a sucker.
There's a sucker.
There's a sucker segment.
There is a sucker.
Is that the one Bowman shot?
No, you.
Oh, me? Oh God! Thank you, Dean.
Can you dig that sucker? Yes, we did on the don't say Lumberjack Lodge, Sturgeon Lake, doubleheader. You got a smallie and I got a sucker, or vice versa. One of us got a sucker and one got a smallmouth. I can't remember.
But the whole
that
episode's kind of based around them.
Because these bass were all feeding on the sucker eggs. Well, we assumed we're on the sucker eggs. So, and there was lots of suckers in there.
Oh my God, it was crazy suckers.
Yeah.
Anyways, if you have a question, just like our good friend Kyle Benning from Iowa has, send it to us, Dean, who will he'll write it down, I'm sure, to info@fishingcanada.com. That's info@fishingcanada.com, or Facebook and or Instagram page. And he will.
Great question, by the way, Kyle.
Yes.
That was good. I like that one. That was good. And good idea. Thanks for that. Maybe
it can be, if I could just add to that for a moment, maybe it could be in pursuit of record-sized coarse fish, bowfin, sheephead, or gar.
The bowfin thing we did at Cranberry Lake, they have almost Ontario record proportion there.
Right.
The gar, Ottawa River, they have record proportion there for sure. I think Jamie Pastilli's almost got one of those records, or he had one at one time. What were the other ones?
Sheephead.
Sheepy, Bay of Quinte. You get 30s there. You can get a literal 30. Yeah, we got them.
30.
We got them well over 20, and it was in October. So I don't know what the record, Canadian Ontario record would be there. So we could do that. It would take a bit of effort for sure, but we could do it. Suckers, I don't know. It's not about suckers, so I don't know how we get a record sucker. But another thing we haven't done in a while is carp, just common carp.
So add that to the list too.
Add that. There's some big ones out there too.
We got our work cut out for us, but first.
How did a small-town sheet metal mechanic come to build one of Canada's most iconic fishing lodges? I'm your host, Steve Niedzwicki, and you'll find out about that and a whole lot more on the Outdoor Journal Radio Network's newest podcast, Diaries of a Lodge Owner. But this podcast will be more than that. Every week on Diaries of a Lodge Owner, I'm going to introduce you to a ton of great people, share their stories of our trials, tribulations, and inspirations. Learn and have plenty of laughs along the way.
Meanwhile, we're sitting there bobbing along, trying to figure out how to catch a bass. And we both decided one day we were going to be on television doing a fishing show.
My hands get sore a little bit when I'm reeling in all those bass in the summertime, but that's might be for more fishing than it was punching.
You so confidently you said, "Hey Pat, have you ever eaten a drum?"
Find Diaries of a Lodge Owner now on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcast.
We interrupt this program to bring you the much anticipated bonus code for the latest Fishing Canada giveaways. This week's code is YURT. That's Y-U-R-T, all capital letters, YURT. Just type that in the bonus code section of the contest and receive 100 free entries towards all our current giveaways. For those who haven't entered yet, what the heck are you waiting for? Head on over to fishingcanada.com while you listen to the rest of this episode. Click contests and sign up for all the latest Fishing Canada giveaways. And now, back to the show. All right, let's find out about some mooses, shall we?
Yeah, I want to know about mooses. I don't know much about mooses, so this should be good.
Joining us now.
Obviously, we don't even know how to say it, do we?
No.
Mooses.
I'm assuming from Trent University. I could be wrong, but definitely with the Ontario Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry. Dr. Brent Patterson, who is the adjunct professor and research scientist with the Ontario Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry.
Yeah.
And Joe Northrup, also adjunct professor at Trent University in research science with the Ontario Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry. Good day, gentlemen.
Hello, guys.
Morning. Good morning.
First of all, Brent, correct me if I'm wrong. You and I go way back to the Outdoor Journal radio days. I believe we had an interview on the Fan 590 about this very subject years ago.
Yeah, I think I've been on once or twice talking about Algonquin wolves, and we talked about moose, and I think we even talked about deer in winter one time.
That's right.
Yeah. Look at you guys.
Hey, the memory.
Your relation. That is the mind-blowing part of it all right there, is your memory, bud. Good work.
Well, gentlemen, first of all, once again, welcome to Outdoor Journal Radio podcast. I have to say, though, this certainly is not a new subject. It seems like we've been talking about moose studies and trying to figure out why moose is in the shape that it's in terms of numbers for years now. And yet I'm reading here and saying, we're now embarking on a new study. Can you kind of open the door to that one for us?
Sure. So, moose are a really important resource for people in Ontario. And it's probably the marquee, species certainly amongst big game hunters in the province. And we've got a long history of I guess, monitoring and managing moose. But yeah, something happened in the 2000s, or started to happen in the 2000s, and across most of the province, we saw pretty pronounced declines, in many areas in moose numbers, for almost a 20-year period, beginning in the early 2000s. And so a lot of those declines were characterized by really low numbers of calves. So, in the winter when the province would fly the moose aerial inventories, we were just seeing very few calves with the cows. Now, for many years, our harvest system in Ontario was such that in most parts of the province, a hunter could buy a calf tag over the counter. So there was less restriction on that relative to bull and cow tags where you had to enter a lottery, and it was much more restrictive. So there's, there was some speculation, though, maybe we were just shooting too many calves, but also there's the speculation about predation, maybe there's just too many, or wolves and bears maybe are eating too many calves. There's a lot of uncertainty, but regardless of what was actually going on, it was clear that numbers were declining pretty aggressively in some spots. And so we'd been talking about this and looking at existing data and doing some analyses with existing data for a number of years. But we finally got to the point where it's like, okay, we really need to get some boots on the ground and do some actual field research to try and nail down the relative magnitude of different factors that might be limiting the population growth of moose. So Joe and I convened a workshop a few years ago in Guelph. We brought in some experts from across Canada and the United States that were dealing with similar issues with moose, and we laid all the data that was available for Ontario out on the table, and everybody had a look at it, and lots of good discussions. And in the end of it, we came up with a recommendation for sort of a multi-phased approach where initially we would milk everything we could out of our existing data, sort of use that to guide research needs for field research. Then we would actually conduct some research on the ground where we try and identify like the different things that are killing moose or limiting their population growth, and then even try and get at the relative magnitude of those things. And then the third phase of the work, which is a few years off now, would be to actually like do some manipulations. And so basically like a scientific experiment where we change some things on the ground and then try and evaluate whether these are actually having the intended positive effect on moose populations.
I'd forgotten how wonderful you were as an interviewee, because I could just push the button and sit back. I love it. And you too are appreciating that, aren't you, Joe?
Joe likes this. Yeah, okay, keep her going, brother. You know something?
You could have just as easily shut me up and said, "Okay, that's enough."
No, I'm just kidding.
When you mentioned something there, Brent, and this is sort of, it's on subject, but it's not sort of written in our stuff here. But I've always wondered, as an angler, but I was a small game and a waterfowl hunter, and I always wondered why there was a calf season to begin with. Like does that not freak you out a little bit? It
behooved me then, and it behooves me now that we're still even talking about it.
Yeah. So like, what was the reasoning back? I mean, there must have been a good population of moose back in the day or whatever, and they allowed you to shoot calves. So was there a reasoning like why was that?
So, it's interesting, and I'll give you my opinion, and it may be wrong, but that's sort of the Swedish or the European model, was the liberal harvest of calves and the restricted harvest of adults. And part of the thinking, there's a few things that went into it, but part of it was that it would provide more opportunity. So we could give more calf tags out than we could afford to give, adult bull or cow tags. So it allowed more people to get in the game and hunt.
Why is that? But stop right there. What's the thinking behind that?
Yeah, and the conceptually the thinking was that calves have high mortality rates anyway. So if you shoot a bunch of calves in the fall, some of those calves would die anyway. So gotcha. they call that compensatory mortality.
Right.
The problem is, so we did some calf work in southern Ontario, so in Wildlife Management Unit 49 and in Algonquin Park. I don't know, almost 15 years ago now. And what we revealed with that work is that thinking about compensatory mortality was actually pretty flawed, because most of the mortality of moose calves, natural mortality of moose calves, was happening before the hunting season. So calves were dying of, some exposure and other things like in their first few days of life. And then most of the calves that were being killed by bears certainly were dying by the time they were a month and a half old. And, wolf predation was actually pretty heavy in the summer as well. So all those major mortality factors that we thought, might be compensatory, they're actually happening before the hunt. So by the time the hunting season rolled around, any of those calves that we were taking in the hunt, that was an additive mortality factor on top of everything else. So, it just, it wasn't working the way we hoped it might.
Right.
And for it to really work well, the populations have to be, at relatively high densities where food competition can be a problem. And so those calves will go into the winter, and if they're not in great shape, they die from malnutrition or predation because they're weaker or what have you. And so the real idea behind that heavy calf harvest is, if you're in a population where there's not a lot of vegetation around, not a lot of browse for the animals, then that many calves will die in the winter. And so you take a lot of calves in the fall, and it's not as big of an issue on the population, where, if you take bulls or particularly reproductive cows, then you're actually having potentially major impacts to the population.
Right. Neither one of you have mentioned something that I think you and I talked about 15 years ago, Brent, along with John Witters at the time, who was, I think he had just resigned or retired as park superintendent in Algonquin Park and joined the Outdoor Journal radio program as a producer. But we went through this phase for several months, if I'm not mistaken, back then, talking about winter tick and how it affected the mortality rate, especially of the calves that were born that year. Is that still an issue, or is it kind of gone now? We thought it was going to be bad, but maybe it wasn't as bad as we thought.
So certainly not gone, and that's something that we're really interested in. So in some, I think we'll certainly focus on ticks here, but more broadly, Ontario is so big that it's probably not the things that are limiting moose populations, probably vary a little bit across the province depending where you are. And I think that would be the case with ticks. So, for example, where we're starting this research in Wildlife Management Unit 13, north of Thunder Bay, just from some pilot work we did last winter, down closer to the southern edge of Unit 13, closer to Thunder Bay itself, we saw some moose with pretty aggressive hair loss in late winter, and when we were catching the moose and handling them, we were actually doing transects on the moose, counting the number of ticks. We'd part the fur on these 10-centimeter transects across their body and count the ticks. And again, it's early days, preliminary work, but it seemed like the tick loads were considerably higher further south, where moose overlapped with deer. Then by the time you got even to the north end of 13, which isn't that far north along a gradient, tick loads were much lower. And so we're really interested in that. And certainly we have some colleagues in other jurisdictions that are looking at ticks. And the tick mortality can be really high in some cases. And it seems to primarily affect calf moose just short of their first birthday. So we're hoping to collar a bunch of, we call them short yearlings, but they're just calves in the wintertime. Collar a bunch of those this winter and see just how bad ticks might be for them come next spring.
That's what's going to intrigue me is that if they find that this is such a drastic thing that's happening to these calves, how will the MNRF try and alleviate that? What are you going to do to get rid of the ticks? Or how's you know what I mean? I don't want to even ask you guys that because I'm sure it's just prospect right now. But I mean, obviously the ticks are a problem. They're a problem for everything. People walking their dogs. Dean walked his dog, 5-10 ticks every morning on his dog. You know what I mean, like that. So it's getting out of hand. So I'm wondering the next stage if they find that's a problem.
Yeah, it's a pretty challenging one. Again, Brent was mentioning we have some colleagues that are working in Quebec that are actually looking at using a acaricide, so actually putting a chemical on captured calf moose that kills off the ticks, and they're showing that has a really high potential to increase their survival. It's definitely not something that would ever be applicable at a large scale. You have to actually handle the animal. Right. So the tick problem is a pretty challenging one, but there's a little bit of evidence that there's maybe some late winter and spring habitat associations with moose. So they're using certain types of habitat that may have higher potential numbers of ticks. And so there may be some sort of forest management prescriptions or guidelines that could be used to make that habitat less attractive for the ticks themselves. But it is a challenging one and one that you would have to kind of depend on some of the results of the study about whether we actually could do anything management wise to address ticks. But it would likely have to be something habitat related in order to be able to have an effect at a large scale.
Yeah, in the West, the habitat's a little more amenable to this, but in some places they're actually using controlled burns to to keep the tick numbers down.
Yeah.
Hey guys, on a scale of 1 to 10, and it's just us talking here. Nobody listens to this program anyway, so you're okay. On a scale of 1 to 10, how confident are you that we've got a good handle on the inventory of moose? In other words, do you feel good about the methodology that's in place now for counting inventory? Do you ever like wake up in the middle of the night and say, man, I don't know if I like these numbers?
Yeah, so no matter what the method that you use to count animals, especially animals that live in heavily forested environments, there's challenges associated with it, and particularly in a province like Ontario that's so big and spans a lot of different types of forests. Those issues are even bigger. The current methods we use for the moose aerial inventory, theoretically, all things equal, they produce valid estimates. There's relatively high uncertainty around them, but they produce valid and robust estimates. I think some of the problem comes in with that sort of uncertainty that we get around our estimates. So every one of those moose aerial inventories that we do get an average estimate. That's the most likely estimate, but there's a wide range often of uncertainty. And so, in reality, that population could be anywhere within those bounds, but that's just sort of life, right? We don't have a great way at the scale we work to know with more precision where it is. That said, as one of the things we're hoping to do with this project that we're talking about today, we're going to have a whole bunch of moose collared, and we can actually assess some of the assumptions of the moose aerial inventories we do, try to identify if there's weather or sort of conditions that we fly under that might be better or worse, or allow us to conduct more surveys during different times of year, or try to correct for things like how sightable or how detectable moose are as we're flying along in helicopters. So definitely one of the things we're always trying to refine and improve what we're doing. But I'd say, at the scale we're talking about, for the species we're talking about, what we're doing is pretty good.
Okay.
Yeah.
You mentioned collaring moose.
It's intriguing.
Is it illegal for a hunter to shoot a moose with a collar, or is it just incumbent on that hunter to make sure that they take the collar and return it to you guys? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, for sure. So it's not only is it not illegal, but we would encourage all harvesters to treat the collared moose the same as they would treat any other moose. So we're tagging the moose, collaring them in the wintertime. We're darting them from helicopters. The short yearling, the calf moose, will just be captured with a net from the helicopter. They won't even be drugged. The drugs we're using are completely flushed from the system in 45 days. So long before the hunting season starts in the fall. So there's no reason to avoid shooting a collared moose. And in fact, the collars are relatively cryptic. They're black bands. There's a little white case here. And in most cases, the hunter won't even see the collar until after they've fired their shot. And our number is written on the collar, and we just, if somebody shoots one, we want to know about it. We might ask, a few questions, but that's fine.
No, because
it seems odd. Like, you go to all that trouble to collar it, and now you're saying, hey, have at it. I would think you guys want that animal in the herd for years.
Well, but think about us trying to, we're trying to understand how important ticks are as a mortality factor, how important wolves are and bears and all these different things. We can't really contextualize those things properly unless we know how important hunting is. So we really want the hunting towards the collared moose to be as unbiased as possible.
It's close to like tagging fish. Basically, you can throw it back if you want it, but you can keep it just as long as you keep put the info down, and you call the MNRF and say, hey, it was a 5-pound largemouth that I was very happy in catching.
Yeah, because exactly like Fred said, we really want to know. We want to know what that influence of hunting is. Right. Because, there's all these potential factors, predation, habitat, all those things, and to be able to understand how those are impacting moose, we need to know that sort of additive effect or whatever it may be of hunting.
All I'm hearing the last few years, I'd say probably about 75 to 80% of my buddies that do hunt moose, I'd say 75 to 80% of them are leaning towards the fact that they just don't see as many moose out there, therefore they're not as successful in their harvest. And then I talk to others who say, man, this is crazy. I had an opportunity last week to probably shoot 12 moose, and I didn't do it. You know what I mean? Jerry is one of those guys.
Really?
Yeah. So, can you give us an idea, if you're at liberty to discuss this, can you give us an idea of what the numbers look like out in this province in terms of moose?
I guess I'm not sure. Do you mean what's the current population status?
Based on your estimations, based on your samples, based on whatever it is that you do, what do you think in terms of numbers? And the reason I'm asking that, because the next question I'm going to ask you is, do you know how many tags or licenses there are, and do those two numbers, is there a correlation between those two numbers?
Well, certainly there, and Joe and I can't tread too far into the harvest management end of things. That's we'll be stepping on other people's toes there.
I figured that,
but I can tell you that so I think the provincial population is somewhere between 80 and 100,000. As of last count. We've had a bit of trouble with our inventories the last couple of winters because of poor winter conditions, and like last winter, for example, was a real bust, and most of our aerial surveys that were planned for last winter didn't happen.
And that's because lack of snow, not too much snow, just the lack of winter, right?
Yeah, just lack of and we need good snow and light conditions, and it just didn't happen in most places. So there's a lot of catch up to do this winter with the aerial inventories. And for the harvest, there's a lot of, I know hunters get frustrated sometimes and think that these decisions are made flippantly, but there's a lot of people that put a lot of thought into sort of carefully planning the harvest, and it's done on the, as you guys know, at the scale of Wildlife Management Unit, across the province. And so for each of those units, the current status of the population is considered, and then other pressures that might be facing the population are considered. And then there are guidelines, for different levels of harvest for bull, cow, and calf tags that are applied. And so it's pretty, it's pretty prescriptive, and quite an involved process there that, comes up with the quotas for a year. And some of the work, like I mentioned at the beginning of this conversation, we talked about, doing an analysis of existing data to try and sort of help guide where we should be going next. And one of the things that Joe and I and a postdoc that we had working with us did was to look at factors that influence tag fill rates. So, because you can allocate a certain number of tags, for bulls or cows or calves, but unless you know what the likely success rate of hunters holding those tags is, it's hard to translate that tag allocation to an actual harvest. And, when you're trying to do something for the population, you really need to, it doesn't matter how many tags you issue, what you really want to know is how many moose are going to be harvested. So we recently published a paper to offer a bit more guidance on that. But yeah, there's still a fair bit more we can do there. But for now, I would just assure your listeners that these decisions aren't made on napkins, and that there are a lot of smart folks doing the best they can.
And then just to build on that a bit, like you mentioned about friends going out, and some see lots of moose, some don't. And part of that's just Ontario is a big province, and sort of how moose populations have done across the province has varied pretty substantially over the last 10, 20 years. And so, up in the Northwest, there's been huge declines. There's some parts, particularly closer to Manitoba, where moose numbers are, more than 50% lower than what they were 20 years ago. Northeast has had some declines, some increases, some stability. And then in the South, there's actually been, over the last 5 to 10 years, there's actually been increases kind of across the, not all units, but more or less across the board in the South. Yeah. So it really depends. And then, Brent was talking about that tag fill rate or hunting success paper. One of the things that postdoc found with that analysis was actually that the more hunters per moose that are out on the landscape, the lower the success rate. So you get some interference kind of competition there, where more hunters out there makes it less, you see less moose. And so there's a lot of factors going on there beyond just population numbers that can influence, how high a quality hunt people have or whether they see moose. But, quite complicated and a lot going on.
Brent gave us that number, 80 to 100,000. Ontario is a huge province. Is that a low number, a normal number, alarmingly low number? What would you say? Well,
I think the more interesting thing to me, more than just the number, is the variability, right? So, if picture a heat map of the province, and hot colors are high densities and cool colors are low densities. It's really quite varied, and so each wildlife management unit, wildlife management units in the province are amalgamated into larger zones called wildlife landscape zones. But each of these scales, there's actually an objective. There's a population objective for moose, and like Joe said, there's some areas where moose are doing okay. There's some areas where they're just sort of so-so, and there's other areas where things are poor. I think on the whole, and I don't have the table in front of me, but on the whole, there's probably more units where current populations are below the desired range, below the objective range, than areas where they're actually within the range, but in some areas we're starting to move things in the right direction. So I and again, Joe mentioned the units up against Manitoba. There's a couple of units there, and then down towards Lake of the Woods and Fort Francis, where really moose, they've really bottomed out in those places. And that, it's hard to imagine what it's going to take for moose to recover in those areas. Yeah. But other parts of the province, things aren't nearly as dire, and I think there's certainly hope.
It's funny in those areas. You mentioned Lake of the Woods and Dryden, Fort Francis, all that area too. And I don't want you guys to go offside, if you know what I mean. But I will on your behalf. I think one of the problems in those areas is that moose is almost a staple. In terms of nutritional value, there's a lot of families that live in those remote rural areas that's going to the grocery store, right? And I'm just wondering how many moose in those areas are taken without you guys even knowing, meaning it's not part of the tagging system, it's not part of the anything that you guys do, but the moose are being used because it's sustenance. It feeds families.
You're saying poaching and shit like that?
I'm not gonna call it poaching. I'm not going to call it poaching.
I'll call it poaching.
You can call it whatever you want. I'm just saying that they're not documented and not reported, and in other words, not part. When you're here, I have a difficult time understanding how you can do your job managing and counting inventory of anything, whether it's moose or fish or any wildlife at all. In order to have an accurate count of your inventory so that you can assess it and then make decisions on how to properly manage it, you have to have the ability or potential of being able to count all of the pieces of that inventory. But I don't think and that's why I asked that question earlier on, how confident are you of the methodology that's in place now? I just don't know whether you guys have the tools and not the wherewithal. You have the wherewithal, but the tools and freedom to be able to really truly assess what that inventory is before you put together a management plan. And the rural areas that you just mentioned are probably the worst ones to try and keep a good count of. How do you feel about that comment? Do you think you have got, in other words, if there was a magic wand that could be waved and it said, okay, Brent and Joe, when I wave this wand, all of the restrictions that you currently have in terms of being able to truly count and assess the moose population will be gone, do you think it would change your lives? Come on now.
We might do it work. Yeah, I mean, well, I guess there was a lot there, but so in terms of poaching and that, we don't have obviously a great way to know how much that's happening across the province, right? But I'm just, for sure there are moose that are taken without tags illegally and that sort of thing. And with our research project that we're implementing now in WMU 13. With collars, that's the way you get at it, right? That's how you answer those sorts of questions. So at least in some part of the province, we'll be able to figure out how common that sort of event is and how much of an impact it has on the population. But then in terms of how those sorts of factors come into influencing management and that sort of thing, in reality, unless it's hugely common, and by that I mean just one of the main drivers of population change. Our methods are actually fairly robust to it, and unless there's big changes over time. So if say we're off by 10% on our estimates of the number of moose, and say 5% of the moose are taken for poaching each year, over time, if that's pretty constant, then actually our methods are actually okay. If we're wrong, but we're wrong consistently across time, then our ability to manage the moose population actually isn't that impacted. We may be wrong with how many moose we're taking, or what proportion of the population we're taking, or the absolute number of moose that are taken. But if those biases that we have in our methods or in the way that we account for harvest or poaching are consistently biased, then it doesn't present as big a problem as it might seem for how we manage moose.
Okay, good point.
Hey guys, what about, I'm sure you keep up on other provinces and that. We always hear that Newfoundland has a ridiculously large population of moose. Any idea what their population is, and is it too many moose over there?
And certainly in their national parks, like Gross Morin, they tend to have too many moose, and some national parks have instituted culls to try and lower moose. But the big thing, and you're right, Newfoundland is has always been heralded, I guess, for its abundant moose. One of the big differences there is that they hunt moose in Newfoundland, but they only have one predator aside of hunters, and that is black bears. They don't have wolves. Right. And if you look across North America, generally areas that have one predator plus humans, harvesting moose, the populations tend to be pretty robust to that. But when you have two substantial predators and humans harvesting moose, so bears and wolves and humans, then it gets a little harder to share the bounty. And then if, we talked about ticks earlier and these other stresses that the population might be under, like, the more hands we have in the pie, the less robust the population is to these things. So Newfoundland has the Yeah, they're certainly different than anywhere in Ontario, just because they have a completely different ecological community.
So what do you do in a case like that? I know there's been all kinds of. I've got a good friend of ours is in the meat business, and he's reached out and offered his services to go in and help eliminate some of the stock of moose in Newfoundland. But what do they do in a case like that? I mean, obviously we're nowhere near there in terms of what you guys are responsible for. You're responsible for trying to maintain and grow what you have. How would you, if you were in the opposite position, like what do you do when you have too many? Because obviously they're going to cause problems for themselves. I'm talking about the moose, right? If there's too many moose, it will harm.
You gotta be careful in those cases. Like and a recent example is Cape Breton. The Cape Breton Highlands in Nova Scotia, where for years they were famous for having a really abundant moose population, and access was limited up in the Highlands, but they had a pretty liberal harvest, allowed up there. They introduced some culls, and involved some local First Nations to help, bring numbers down. And then they had just a crazy hard winter last year, and really, and you need to have a really severe winter to, for it to be a problem for moose. They've got such long legs, they can deal with, most conditions. But now suddenly Nova Scotia found itself in a position where the moose population dropped way too much, and they've actually suspended all harvesting for 3 years.
Wow.
Because they went too far.
No kidding.
Wow. So it's not obviously not a perfect science, is it? I mean, what you guys do, as much as it's very scientific and everything is calculated, it's just not a perfect science when you're dealing with nature, because she's able to throw curveballs at you every day of the week, right? That's got to be difficult.
One of the problems that make it more imperfect than it has to be is the sort of inertia, and so we can go out and do a count and make some recommendations, but sometimes, recommendations to change management, sometimes there's a lag there, and it might, the government has to engage with different groups, about these proposed changes, and it might be the change is needed now, but it might take several years for the change to come into effect, and we're always sort of a step or two behind, and that sort of lag between management need and management action can be really problematic for causing big swings in populations.
A lag in governmental decisions, Ange. Can you figure that?
No,
I never
say
heard
it ain't
that.
so.
That can't be.
One area I think that the moose is fortunate that it doesn't have this factor going against it, because some of our fisheries and small game do, and that is, as the population base grows in Ontario at an alarmingly fast rate, that means more people are on the playing field harvesting fish and wildlife, et cetera. The moose is kind of protected from that because it's, first of all, it's still a relatively difficult and expensive sport, if we'll call it that, to get into, and because it's so restricted with the number of tags that are being issued each year. I don't imagine you guys are looking at population growth. I'm talking human population growth at all as a factor in putting together your numbers at all?
You want to jump in? Yeah, well, again, just that's not really Brent and I's area in terms of determining numbers of tags and that sort of thing. But back to what Brent was talking about earlier and trying to identify sort of number or success rates of hunters and those sorts of things. Human population growth is accounted in so much as number of people that are applying for tags, and it's likely to have more of a impact on sort of success rates of getting a tag than it would necessarily on sort of moose harvest, as long as it's controlled. Those factors like you mentioned, poaching or other things like just more traffic on highways and things like that. Those all can be ways in which increasing human populations can impact moose populations. But
traffic,
but in terms of harvest, I think as long as it's controlled, it can be managed regardless.
A quick question on that, people and harvest and whatnot. We were driving back from Nova Scotia and New Brunswick recently doing a shoot there. And I don't know whether were you in the truck with me or were you sleeping at the time when we saw that dead moose on the side of the road?
Nick mentioned it.
Yeah. We actually saw, and you don't often you see evidence of where there's been contact with a moose in a vehicle, but I never certainly saw the actual carcass there.
Yeah, not very often.
No,
sometimes remember a couple of times in Northwest Ontario, we did see, all the big truckers have those massive grills on them, but they're still not that often. You see
what's the rules and regulations on that? In other words, could we have pulled over and laid claim to this animal? Like, how does that work?
So yes, in Ontario, if that happened, you would call and report it, and you would actually get a permit to possess the meat if you wanted to claim it, and if you were the first on scene. And I think that's why you don't often see them, because they get picked up pretty quick. In your case, so I don't know. I don't know if you need to be a New Brunswick resident. So, like, if you were driving through New Brunswick and you guys are Ontario residents and you found a moose, that might be a little tricky to get the permit. But I don't know.
It was weird because it was just there on its own. There was nobody there. It was like,
you know what though? Sometimes, to me, my thoughts are, if you don't see it happening, you got to wonder how long it's been laying there too, right? If, it's been laying there for 6 or 7 hours in the heat of the sun. I don't know if that's bad for the meat or not. You know, you might have this thought in your mind. We hit a deer once Lisa and I driving to Sudbury, and yeah, we called the OPP, and she actually came out. The OPP officer came over and took a report, all that. She says, "Now, do you want the deer?" And I said, "We have nowhere to put it. It was a little car." And she says, "Okay." And then I don't know what they did after that.
Surprised you didn't ask Lisa to wait by the roadside while you took the deer home.
well, the thing was, I was going to a funeral. If I was coming home from a funeral, that son of a bitch would have been in the back of the car. I don't care how I would have cut it up, for sure. Anyway.
It's interesting. We all said, wow, that's never, in all the years we've been traveling the roads, you just never see that, where the full animal is just sitting there on the side of the road.
Are there more, you guys probably know about this, are there more moose killed on the highway at night or in the daytime? I'm assuming at night, but I'm just guessing.
Yeah, I think at night. Like, we'll get into this a little more over the next few years with our research, but we know from other stuff that we've done and work that's happened in other jurisdictions that the most active time of day for moose is dawn and dusk, and then through the night. And they do move around a little bit in the daytime, but yeah, you don't often see moose, crossing the highway in the middle of the day.
Right.
It's a much greater hazard at night.
Is there something about highways? Because we hear sometimes that they get out of the bush to go to this cleared land because of no bugs or whatever. Are they just basically crossing a highway and it's bad timing?
The old chicken, Joe.
The old chicken.
Why'd the moose cross there?
Yeah. Did he just do it to get to the other side, or has he got a reason? Did he got to take a poop? Does he eat the gravel? What is the deal with moose in the roads?
They have pretty, this might be of interest to folks. Like, moose actually have a pretty big home range. So we talk about a home range as being the area that animals use in their daily travails. And for a moose, it's probably 35 to 40 square kilometers. So in many parts of the province, it's going to be inevitable that a home range of that size is going to have a few roads or highways in it. And if the moose wants to access all parts of its range, it's going to have to cross the road a bit. We've got some evidence of moose crossing Highway 17. Some of we've just have 10 cows with GPS collars on them that we put out last winter right now, but a couple of those have crossed Highway 17 a couple of times, and there's a really active rail line, through the range of several of the moose. So, we hear stories about moose getting stuck on the train tracks sometimes when the snow is really deep and it's hard for them to get off to the sides. So, it'll be, as we get more data and more colors, it'll be interesting to look more closely at how the moose sort of view and respond to roads and rail lines.
Interesting.
It's an interesting creature. Obviously, the fact that it is so damn tasty as a consumable just kind of adds to the whole.
You know what freaks me out is how a moose can run through that bush with a big bull with those antlers that wide. I mean, these things are like 4 or 5 feet across or whatever they are. He runs through that bush like he's on fire. You know what I mean? It doesn't faze him at all. And they're quiet too. Like the thing about a bull moose. How much is a big bull moose fully alive? A big bull moose. What would say? What was the weight of them in pounds?
Yeah, on the hoof, big, 1,200 pounds more. Yeah.
So that's a giant animal that walks through maybe even trots through the bush, and you can't even hear them. They're like stealth mode.
Yeah.
And 1,200 pounds, of a beast. It's freaky, but that's nature.
Yeah, Antonio, our good friend Antonio, the host of one of the podcasts on this network, he's got this thing about moose. He's first of all, he's totally intrigued with them, but I don't think he's gone hunting for them, never been able to shoot one.
Right.
And so for him, it's almost become like the holy grail of hunting. The quest for the moose.
I love it.
The first time I hunted moose in Ontario, over 20 years ago, I remember sitting there on opening morning and hearing these little noises, and I was sort of going by what you're saying about how quiet they can be, and I'd heard this noise. Oh, it might be a moose. It might be a moose. And then it was a squirrel, or it might be a moose. And then a grouse walks by. Then maybe an hour later, all of a sudden, 3 moose did come, and this bull was trying to impress the cows it was with, and he was tearing entire trees out of the ground and laying them down. So when the moose finally showed up, it was like, okay, yeah, there's no ambiguity. That
wow. That's a moose.
Wow.
Hey, I got a question, guys. We were talking about it earlier, the predators of the moose. What takes more moose, bears or wolves? Do you have an idea of that?
I think it's probably got to be wolves, just because they have a longer, like wolves primarily take young moose and sort of old moose. They take some prime age moose, but usually it's at either end of the sort of the lifespan. For bears, they might take some older moose, rarely, but most of the moose that a bear kills are going to be like young calves, less than a month and a half old.
Okay.
Interesting. And coyote has not played a role in any of this yet, or are there signs of them starting to nibble away?
Well, we years ago, in Unit 49, west of Algonquin, we documented a couple cases where coyotes did kill moose. But one of those moose was 20 years old, and another got sort of stuck on a slope in some thick bush. So there was sort of extenuating circumstances. And I think across most of northern Ontario, there's very little overlap in space between coyotes and wolves. The wolves rule the woods and the backcountry, and the coyotes are out near the roads and the settled areas. So I'd be really surprised if we found that coyotes had any sort of measurable impact on moose.
Yeah, they're on the Don Valley, spending their time trying to predate on
it's a ground squirrel.
Us idiots driving up and down the Don Valley. Gentlemen, is there anything that folks can do to help in your studies? Is there anything you'd like to just reach out and let them know that?
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, a couple things. One, obviously we talked a bit about earlier. If anyone harvests a collared moose, just make sure you call the number on the collar to give us back the collar, and then to answer a couple questions. But also in Unit 13 in particular, we're really hoping to try to collect some samples from folks that have harvested moose, and we'd like to do a number of different things with those, but looking at parasites and disease from liver or kidney samples and things of that nature. So we'll have crews out in the area, and they can also get in touch with us if they harvest a moose to try to provide a sample so that we can add it to the samples that we're taking as part of this research project and help to answer some of the research questions.
There's nothing right now that anybody should worry about in terms of moose meat. So they would be doing this strictly on a voluntary basis, just to have you find out if there's anything in their product that they've harvested and are going to consume. It's not like we're looking for anything in particular.
Yeah, it would help us to answer some of the questions. Right. Like Brent mentioned earlier, there's lots of different things that might influence moose populations, and diseases and parasites are a big one. And so, by running some tests on some of the different things, we can get at that. But then also some of the other questions we're trying to answer around sort of which some of the things we're hoping to do is trying to understand which bulls are reproducing in the population, how many bulls are needed there to do that. And so getting a small muscle sample, we can do some DNA analysis, and it helps us answer some of the larger questions we're hoping to do in the project.
Yeah, and just to answer your question too about should people be concerned, like from a health perspective, we're not aware of any issues in our moose. Like sometimes people see little white cysts in the meat. Those are cysts from a parasite called Tania. It's perfectly safe. Just cook it to be safe, but there's no risk to people there. And then sometimes we get people send us pictures of moose they shot that have these sort of dark warts on the outside, papillomas, and again, those are benign, perfectly safe. They're not pretty to look at, but they're not harmful anyway. So so far as we know, there's really nothing in our moose in Ontario that people should be worried about from a human health point of view.
Moose burger or moose steak?
Oh,
that's a loaded question. I mean, parts of the body, burger is perfectly fine, but you're not going to catch me grinding up the backstrap.
Attaboy. Do you both hunt, by the way, hunt moose? There you go.
Yeah,
that's good.
Yeah,
good.
Haven't hunted moose yet, but it's on the list.
Perfect.
Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. It's been a pleasure. Brent, let's not make it 15 years in between visits.
No, happy to come back anytime.
All right.
Excellent.
We'll keep checking up with you. If you got anything new to talk to us in terms of your studies and findings, probably as important, we'd love to have you back.
Yeah.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks, guys.
Take care. There you go.
Interesting stuff.
I'm all about burger, though.
Well, you have not had a good backstrap then. You must,
yeah.
And you're still, really?
Oh, well, you take a burger. You take moose.
Yeah.
And
it's a great burger, I know.
you mix it with wild boar.
Oh, okay. Now it's not straight moose.
60-40.
So let's...
And then...
What about a backstrap wrapped with wild boar bacon?
Yeah.
Oh!
Yeah.
Oh, I am hungry right now, brother.
Yeah, that'd be okay. Yeah. If you have any that you'd like me to sample,
I don't have either.
You,
I got a pike in the freezer right now. That'll do.
It's close enough. That's great. It's true. It seems like we're always trying to stay on top of moose, not literally, but trying to stay on top of their populations. It always seems to be every year. It seems to be issues. We have enough, or is this segment?
But don't you think? I don't know if you think the same way. But when I hear about big game hunting in Ontario, you hear so much about deer. The regular talks about deer venison. You don't hear as much about moose. Like this seems like that's kind of a secondary subject, which it shouldn't be, because you're right. It's the ultimate in big game in North America, I would
for
think.
all
right?
reasons.
So, yeah.
Not only if you're just a trophy hunter, not only because of its magnificent antlers and all that stuff.
Delicious.
But the hunt, the protein, the excitement. I mean, it's got to be up there with some of the big game.
I don't know. For me, it just seems like nobody really talks too much about the moose, and the general public don't really know anything about moose or the population. Like, they really don't. They know a bit about deer because they hear about them down here all over the southern parts and all that. But
that's why I was hoping to get an idea on the number of tags and the number of moose hunters each year to give us a sort of gauge. I think the reason you hear more about deer is because there's more people hunting deer.
Well, I mean, it's just a finite number of licenses, right? They can't, no matter how many people, there can be more applications, they're still not going to be.
If you're listening to this and you have the answers, I find it hard to believe that MNRF has not posted somewhere on their site each year the number of moose tags that, in fact, are up for grabs. I would think.
Do you know about that?
I don't know. I apply every year, and I haven't got a tag yet. But you don't see a number. Like, they don't tell you like what you're up against.
Somebody's got to have a number. I mean, let's be honest about it. That would make... I'd be pissed off.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
You have 3,000 tags. You could be one of those tags.
Exactly.
Right? That's all I have to say. Exactly. Yeah, you're right.
Anyways,
they could. But anyway.
If anybody has that info, by all means, reach out to us at wherever it is that you reach out to us at. Dean knows.
info@fishingcanada.com.
Thank you very much. Mr. Bowman, that's it.
/moose.
/moose. That's it.
That's it, bud.
We made it by another one.
Another one.
Holy mackerel.
Bites the dust.
On behalf of the entire crew, Volva behind the cameras, Nick in and out, and of course, Mr. Dean Taylor, our producer.
Come on now.
He is Mr. Peter Bowman. I'm Angelo Biel. Thanks for joining us. We'll catch you next time. This episode of Outdoor Journal Radio has been brought to you in part by the Invasive Species Centre, protecting Canada's land and water from invasive species, and Sail, the ultimate destination for your outdoor adventures.